So today we are diving into an important but often overlooked topic, imposter syndrome, and how it affects the way that we manage our finances. Now, to help unpack this, we've got a special guest, Alani Bankhead from Mighty Sparrow Coaching. Now, Alani is a personal development coach and career expert who helps individuals overcome fears and imposter syndrome to help them achieve the lives that they were meant to live. Today, she's here to talk with us about how self-doubt can hold us back from financial success, and most importantly, what we can do about it. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome to today's show. I am Brad Nelson, founder of Debt Free Dad. I paid off about $45,000 in debt, have been debt free for more than 11 years now, and I've also helped thousands of other people save and pay off tens of millions of dollars with the work that we do here at Debt Free Dad. Now, after listening to this episode, if you're someone who wants to take your finances to the next level, maybe you're just stalled out, you're tired, you're stressed, like everything you do, it just doesn't seem like it's going to work. Well, we've got a great resource that I'm going to share with you here that's going to help you understand how you can get better results with your finances seriously in just as little as 30 to 60 days. It'll be amazing how much better you're going to feel. I'm going to be sharing some details about that resource coming up later on in today's show. So, hey, Alani, welcome to the Debt Free Dad podcast. So glad that you are joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so stoked to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we said right before I hit record, imposter syndrome. Those two words are not something that we often bring up or associate with personal finances. In fact, some people might not even really understand what imposter syndrome is and how it could affect your finances. So it's awesome to have an expert like you come and join us. But before we get to that conversation, I want you to share with our listeners your extensive professional background, because I started learning about what you've done in the past and where you've come from and the experience you've had. And it is fascinating. Like, you would be someone that I would love to sit down and have like dinner with, because you probably have some crazy stories that you could share with some of the work that you've done.
Oh, I do have some crazy stories. And one day we're going to break bread for sure.
Yeah.
So I have over 20 years as a military officer and a supervisory special agent. So I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. And what that means is I have hunted terrorists. I have hunted spies. I've worked with special operations as a human intelligence operative. So the people that have like briefcases full of money and they're meeting with their informants in secret and getting intelligence, like that's what I used to do for special ops. And I actually specialize in child sex trafficking and child sex exploitation cases. So I train justice system professionals all over the world and how they can feel empowered. Imposter syndrome plays in that as well. And I was even a senior Pentagon bodyguard to one of the top Pentagon officials. And so if you're hearing this and you can't see me, it's crazy because I'm 5'3", I'm very petite, I'm Hispanic, and I look like I'm 12. And so, so people are like, what the hell? Like, you do not look the part at all. And so why imposter syndrome is important for me is because I suffered from it for years and years, just thinking I wasn't good enough and not worthy for these positions that I had, only to realize that the things I thought were my weaknesses, so my imposter telling me I wasn't good enough because A, B, C, D, were actually the reasons that not only got us to mission accomplishment, but helped me create a life and career that I really love and appreciate for myself and my family.
Yeah, so cool. Well, first, like I said already, I want to thank you for your service, especially on like an anniversary like today. We're recording is September 11th.
Thank you.
Obviously, thank you so much for that. But I was a little nervous interviewing with you, honestly, because I'm like, I kind of have struggled with this, starting my own business. And I don't have a financial degree. I'm not an expert at personal finance. I'm just like your normal everyday guy who got out of debt and people started asking me for help. And I just was willing to do that. And there's times where I hit the record button on these podcasts, or I'm interviewing and talking to other people, or I'm up on a stage speaking about this. And I feel like sometimes like I have no business sitting up here talking about finance with all these people. And it's been something that I've had to deal with, especially very early on when I started, of having the confidence to kind of push through that. And I honestly, people might ask, like, how did you do it? I don't really know. I just did it. And even sometimes today, I still struggle with a little bit of that at times.
Yes. Ooh, we can definitely talk about that a little bit. I love it. Well, so to answer your question, I think it's important to start very generally and talk about what imposter syndrome is, because a
Yeah,
lot of people don't know.
sure.
So it's this belief that you're not good enough or qualified for your position, titles, accolades, like success, positive feedback, and that eventually people around you are going to figure out that you're this imposter, and that when they do, catastrophic things happen. So you
Yeah,
might lose that job, you might lose professional esteem. It might even go as far as you lose your job and then your livelihood, and you can't pay your rent or your mortgage, and like, so your brain is doing this thing to try to protect you and keep you safe. And so the term originally was imposter phenomenon, and it was coined in the 1970s by these two psychotherapists, so Dr. Clance and Dr. Immis. I'm probably butchering their names, but they saw these very successful professionals around them. They didn't understand why there was all this self-doubt. And so they did a study and found that 70% of study participants had this imposter phenomenon occurring. Now, more than 60 studies have been done since the original one, and that number stays the same across all 60 studies. Now, if
wow.
you're in a marginalized population, so like women or minorities, that number actually goes up. And so it impacts all elements of your life. But since this is a finance podcast, it does impact your finances, because the core thought around your inner imposter is, I'm not worthy, or I do not matter. And then it tells you all these reasons. So for you, you were saying, who am I to get on this stage? Because I don't, probably like, I don't have a PhD in economics, or
Yeah,
I don't
right.
have some credential. So I'm not smart enough and I'm not educated enough, are the two top imposter syndrome voices that I encounter in my practice. And financially, clearly, when you're going to apply for a job, as an example, you're much less likely to negotiate your pay, because that voice is saying you're not valuable.
Yeah,
The same thing applies when you go to ask for a raise. So let's say you're due for a raise and the raise hasn't come. You're waiting for them to reward your hard work. It's very hard for people with imposter syndrome to go to their boss and say, hey, can I please get a pay bump? Like, even though you deserve it, you deserve it. And so not only does this affect your current ability to make income, so you're making less money to save and invest, you're making less money to live a life of abundance, to be able to provide for yourself and for your family, but even long term. So look at your retirement. You're putting less in a retirement now, which means you have less in 10, 20, 30, 40 years when you need it. Same thing goes for Social Security. You're paying less in taxes, which means you take less Social Security when that time comes when you actually need it. And that's just the money.
yeah,
So absolutely, imposter syndrome impacts money in more ways than we realize. And the thing that blew my mind initially when I heard about imposter syndrome was how many people suffered from it. So I was just like, wait, I've had this voice in my head my whole life, and 70% of you guys have it too, and we don't talk about this?
yeah.
What? So
Fascinating, right?
that's why I have my company, because the vast majority of people aren't out to become billionaires, and
Right.
they don't want to be like money mongers. They just want to live a decent life and be generous with their loved ones and be comfortable, and that is amazing. Maybe you want more, but in order to create that, you have to understand the subconscious thoughts that are dictating your behaviors, and then replace the thoughts that aren't serving you with more powerful financial thoughts.
Where do these come from? Are we pre-programmed to already have these at birth, or is this something that we learn as children from people who raise us? Like, where do these imposter syndromes and these beliefs come from?
So everybody has an origin story. So it's not something that you're usually born with, although there is a lot of data these days that talks about generational trauma and it being carried through DNA. But for the most part, there's an origin story. So for me, I had a college professor. This was like really when it came to life for me, who told me I was not good enough. I would never commission and become an officer in the Air Force, much less get my double degree. And so that day I was like, I will show you what I am capable of.
Yeah.
And I graduated, I commissioned, I went on to do crazy things. But what I didn't realize was that voice of like, you're not worthy, followed me for years and years and years. And so one of the tools that I teach people, and I know this sounds ridiculous, but it's really powerful, is naming that voice. Because that voice is something you created to protect yourself from living your most powerful life. And so I'm going to like jump ahead to the answer part. Like I'm going to answer all the world problems here and say that when your imposter comes up is actually when you know you're on track doing your life purpose.
Wow, that's fascinating you say that. Because I agree. I agree.
Right.
It's
So
it's when the majority of your fears are showing up, right?
yes. And the reason why is because this life purpose is so central to who you are that this thing you created in your brain is saying, don't do that, because if you fail at your life purpose, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like you're a failure at your life purpose. So don't take action because you are not qualified to talk about finances or to talk about getting out of debt. So don't even get on the stage. And so
Okay.
most people fight their imposter syndrome because it's scary, but all the nuggets that you need to your success are like what your imposter is telling you and what you need to launch into that. So the fact that you did get on the stage and now you've inspired thousands, millions of people, whether it's in person or through the podcast or your blog or whatever it might be, the reason why you're so successful is because you didn't have a PhD and you don't have all the crazy credentials. You're a quote unquote average guy who got out of debt and you just want to share the stories and the secrets and the tools. And because of that, people are like, he's a regular guy and I'm a regular guy. Like if he can do it, then I can do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is so true. And you're right. The fears that you have to face, and even when getting out of debt, I felt some of the same fears, like, because debt is such a normal thing. Paycheck to paycheck living is such a normal thing, especially here in the United States, but even all over the world, people that we've helped. And I think a lot of people get stuck in this, well, why should I be any different? Like, who am I to stand up and say, I want to get out of debt and be debt free? And when I first did this, now granted, with today's social media and podcasts and all that stuff out there, I think the financial freedom movement is much bigger than what it was when I was getting out of debt. But when I started, like, people made fun of me for it. They're like, you're crazy. Like, you're not going to be able to ever live without debt. And that was long before I ever had this idea of having this business. So I think you have some of those fears too. And I know a lot of people that we work with have those fears of, like, I don't deserve to have financial freedom. I don't deserve to have money in my bank account. I don't deserve to be successful. And some of the reasons why they say that is because this is all I've ever known, was to struggle. It's how I was raised. Are there any things that you can share with someone who struggles with those fears, that imposter syndrome, just from a getting started point? And I know you went through some of your own financial struggles, so maybe you can share a little bit of that. But how does someone move from that fear to, I am worthy of going after this and living this kind of lifestyle that I want?
Right. So there's a lot of different ways that you can start that journey, and it just depends on what works for you. One of the key behaviors of imposter syndrome is perfectionism, which leads to burnout. Yeah. So because your imposter says you're not good enough, you're going to overwork to try to become the best. It's never going to be good enough. That voice is never going to be satisfied. And then you're going to burn out and be like, I don't understand how this happened. Right. And so when you know that that's how imposter syndrome works, allowing yourself to be imperfect is one of the first steps that you need to take to start the journey. So I'm here to tell you, you're going to try 10, 20, 30 different things before you figure out what your getting out of debt journey looks like. And failing, quote unquote, one time at a tactic doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means that's not the tactic for you, and we have to try a different one. And so the most powerful tool I explain to people is the awareness that the voice is there. And so again, actually, I forgot to mention, so naming your inner imposter is a powerful tool because it allows you to separate the imposter from you. So you think the imposter is part of you, it's your psyche, but it's not. It's a mechanism you created to keep you safe. So mine is called the Mayor of Whoville from How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
I love that.
Because, and I remember when I first watched this movie, 30 years ago, like I felt a pinch in my soul and I didn't know why. But there's a scene where Christmas has been stolen. The whole town has woken up to no presents. The mayor turns to Cindy Lou and says, "This is what we get for listening to a little good for nothing girl." But we, the audience, know that Cindy Lou's right. Christmas is not about things. Christmas is not about anything but family and community and the love and connection that we have. And so whenever that voice comes up for me now, it's the mayor. I know now that I'm on track, that I'm doing exactly what I need to do, because if this was not aligned with my life purpose, I wouldn't be so freaked out about it. And now I have other things I can do to interact with Mr. Mayor in my case, right? And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But I think to further answer your question, you have to look really big picture first into how you interpret the world. And I want to share a couple of stories from my career that I hope will upend that for some people. So first being, I hunted terrorists with special operations in the Middle East. And I remember like a lot of my informants were actually terrorists themselves. So they were car bomb makers. I had evidence that they had killed other Americans or innocent Iraqis. Wow. I'm a very nice, kind, generous person, but I have an alter ego that when it comes to protecting life, like I flip that switch and I become Deadpool, and it's like a game to me. Like I'm going to win. Okay. Because you're trying to kill people.
Yeah. Right.
But the reality was that, part of the work involves relationship building. So, there's an old saying called like 3 cups of chai. So you never talk business the first 3 meetings. It's all getting to know the person. And I'm trying to figure out what motivates you as an individual so I can manipulate you, basically.
Yeah.
And there was one informant I had who was a car bomb maker. He had killed Americans. And I found myself talking to him and I was like, if this guy had been born in any other country, he'd probably be in a vehicle, like a car engineer. Like he was brilliant. He was super smart. Yeah. He had the crappy luck of being born in Iraq. And he had to put food on the table for his family and kids. So he partnered with Al-Qaeda to make car bombs and get paid for that. So first of all, like so often in America, we forget the abundance that we live in just by being American.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the same thing applies to, I went to high school for a little bit overseas because my dad was in the military. And there was a German guy. So he was German American in my high school. And I was like, why would you not stay in school in Germany? Well, at the time, German high school was set up in a system where I think it was junior high. They decided if you were going to be white collar or blue collar. And they had 2 different educational systems. And I was like, that's not fair. Like, what if you're a late bloomer? What if you're just not like, are you kidding me? And so he was going to this American school because the American school system had infinite opportunities where you could do whatever you wanted. Right. And so for, if you're American listening to this, like, congratulations, you won the lottery to be born American.
Yeah, 100%.
And this is the country where you can literally come here with 0 and become anything you want. You can be a billionaire. It's happened. And so I think that mindset is really important in helping you shift your perspective on what you're able to create.
Yeah.
And so from there, now the question is, what do you want to create? Like, what does your soul want to create? Because you can monetize it because it's America. You can do that. You're only limited by your creativity. And so to your point, so many people are focused on what society says I should do. And, debt is normal. I'm with you where I got to a point where, so for me, I had a family member say $30,000 in debt is normal for Americans. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I found myself in 16,000 consumer debt. And I was like, this does not feel good. I don't know what the right answer is, but I know this isn't it.
Right.
And now we're millionaires. My husband and I are millionaires because we did very simple things, investing in the market, saving, creating more income, like things that anybody can do. But the core root is you have to remove the belief that you aren't worthy or capable of creating that change.
Yeah. Yeah, it is fascinating. Just the perspective you bring of just that simple thought of like, here in the United States, we get so much in this tunnel vision of not having these opportunities out there. Can you talk a little bit about the social influence of imposter syndrome? Because it's not only what's happening in our heads that's keeping us stuck, but what's also happening on the outside circles that we've formed, whether it be on social media or in our friends circle, our family, the coworkers that we hang out with. How important is it to align yourself with other people that have some, I guess maybe not the same beliefs, because I feel
Mhm.
like there is some value of surrounding yourself with people with different beliefs to get some different perspectives. But at the same time, I guess maybe it's getting away from the negative beliefs. How important is that in this process of going from these limiting beliefs, this imposter syndrome, to success?
I love that question because, especially with social media, we all know everybody puts their best days and their best pictures on TikTok or Instagram or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But you cannot compare people's outsides with your insides. And so remember, statistically, and this isn't just one study, it's 60 plus studies over the last 5 decades have demonstrated that 70% of people on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook are all experiencing imposter syndrome. It's gotten to the point with imposter syndrome where there are a lot of conversations now about maybe it's just part of the human condition. We don't have to name it this other thing because everybody has it.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and so remembering that, no, that person suffers with their own version of imposter syndrome and not feeling worthy. And I can't compare what's going on in my head with what they're actually showing the rest of the world. And so in terms of who you surround yourself with, I do love that quote of you are the average of the people you spend time with.
Right.
One thing I always struggled with professionally was my fitness, because being a person that's of service, which most people with imposter syndrome are, most people want to be of service. They want to support their communities and their families. And that is a beautiful thing. The downside of being of service is that if you give and give and give and you don't replenish, then you end up depleted and burned out and bitter. And then you're
Yeah.
like, I don't know why. I did the right thing. I was living my community. So fitness was always something that, because I worked child sex crimes cases or terrorism, we would get 2 a.m. phone calls. And so it was very easy for me to say, I'm not going to the gym today because I'm working 90 hours a week.
Right.
But I spent time with people who were very fit. And I literally would be like, how do you wake up at 4 a.m. to go to the gym? And they're like, I just do it. I'm like, but explain to me, like, what happened? And so I would literally be picking their brains. And I had accountability mechanisms where my husband is one of those people. He's a 4 a.m. wake up. It's like his church, the gym. And it was years of me saying, I need you to drag me to the gym. And now it's a habit for me. Like now when he doesn't feel like going, I go, because I recognize now that what was stopping me was me saying, I'm not worth having a healthy body because I have to sacrifice everything, including my physical well-being, to serve kids who are being abused or, share this imposter syndrome message. But the reality was that I burned out a couple of times professionally crashed and burned in the worst way. Like I was drinking too much alcohol. My mental health was garbage. I was diagnosed with PTSD because I wasn't seeing myself as worthy enough to just go to the gym or go for a walk or hydrate. So imposter syndrome really does get into every element of your life. I have clients who have tried to kill themselves.
Wow.
Because their imposter syndrome was like, you're not worthy, you're a piece of garbage, you're not good enough, like what, you have no value. But now on the other side of it, one of the tools that helps heal it is turning that pain into purpose. So me sitting here telling you all my dirty secrets about my over drinking and not taking care of myself and all my consumer debt and all that stuff, I'm glad I went through that now, because if that encourages somebody to see like, that's me, like I'm a hot mess right now and she got out of it. She and her husband are millionaires now. Like I can do this too, I think. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. Once I realized I don't have to be that model or whatever that person is in my head, that imposter was telling me that I had to be. As soon as I realized I didn't have to be that, it was amazing how much more helpful I became and how many more people I was able to help.
So I'm super curious.
Yeah.
When was that moment that you had that realization?
Oh man. Can I pinpoint when it was?
Or maybe a general time. Like when did you feel like the switch flipped for you?
Well, I started out very small in this business and started helping just a few people here and there. And I think once I got a few people, some good results, I was like, I can actually do this. Right. But then there was the whole imposter syndrome of, well, Brad, you can't lose your full-time income from your normal job to go out and do this. And so then that's where financial freedom came into place and being debt free, because by working on my finances, getting out of debt, it took away another excuse from that imposter of saying I couldn't do it because of my income. I no longer needed nearly as much income to survive. I could take back and reduce my income and still be okay and go out and take more risks. So it was like the more I fought against the imposter, the more I took action, the more results I got, the more confidence I got to stand up to them and say, no, you're wrong. So yeah, and that's a good question for you, is you're riddled by fear. You're just stuck because this person is telling you you're not good enough. And this is what we teach inside our membership side. This is what I share with so many people. It's not the big giant steps we're looking for, especially right away. What are the little things that we can do? Because that builds that confidence. Can you share how important of a role that is to kind of fight back this person that's keeping you down?
Yeah, that's a really fantastic point, because what your imposter syndrome is doing is it's actually projecting the end result. So for you, your soul is telling you like, you could make this into a business. Like you could inspire a lot of people and feed your family. Like amazing.
Yeah, crazy.
But all your inner imposter sees is that end result. And but how are you going to get there? That's 100 steps down the road and you see how big it is. But to your point, you started small and you served the person in front of you powerfully. And then the feedback you got was, oh my gosh, this really helped me. And then you helped the next person. And then you got feedback that said, this really helped me. And then the next person. And then you were like, oh, I think I actually have evidence that my theory is correct, that I can help people and I can get paid to do this very important work. So what you're talking about is what I call, it's the 1% rule of every day, I just need to be 1% better. So it doesn't matter if it's like with my private imposter syndrome clients, like I send them an intake email with all these forms and exercises for them to start working on. But every time I send one out, I try to make the form a little bit better, or I try to make the process a little bit more fun or easier. And it only takes me 10 or 15 minutes to make a form better, right? So like on my last intake form, I added how do you prefer to read books? Because sometimes I send books to clients, but are they an audiobook person? Are they a Kindle person? It took me 10 minutes and now I get information when I'm like, I have the perfect book. I can surprise that client and they're like, oh my gosh, you sent me this book. And like, that's so generous, which is who I am.
Yeah.
And you sent it in a way that I receive it, that I will best understand it. And so it's those little moments of connection, those little adjustments that you can make. And as you do your 1%, before you know it, you have an amazing podcast and you're inspiring all these people all over the globe. And you've proven your imposter wrong, which actually is another important tool, is when you're in that stuck victim mode, is first you have to remember what you've overcome in the past. And when you're in victim mode, you have tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Because you're in self-preservation mode. So you forget about all the things that you've succeeded in the past. And I'll give you a really silly example of mine. So I do a lot of child enticement operations. So it's like the To Catch a Predator operations that you see on TV.
Yep.
I've literally done dozens and I've been successful every time, all over the world with different teams. And yet for 2 to 3 days before every operation, I want to throw up. I'm in the fetal position. I literally will have conversations with myself where I'm like, I'm the boss. I can cancel this operation because I'm the boss. And, but then of course I'm like, oh, but we spent months planning, and it's going to happen eventually. And then I get curious. So curiosity is the mechanism that flips the switch for a lot of people, is when else have I felt this way? And what ended up being the result? And then, and then I would think back and I'm like, oh my gosh, Alani, you're being so ridiculous, because literally every operation for the last 20 years, you've been successful. And then that also, for me, I have to engage in spiritual practices. And so everybody has to define this for themselves. But one of the ways that I ask people about their spirituality is, so for you, if I tell you over the last 4 years, I have facilitated the arrest of more than 120 child sex predators and traffickers. Do you think that I stopped other kids from being sexually abused? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But what evidence do you have to prove that?
None, technically.
Right. So you don't have evidence, but you know in your bones that I stopped the abuse of future kids. That's a form of spirituality.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to imagine, you as the visionary, what future you want to create. And then you have to harness your spiritual practices to get there. So pre-op for me, I have a playlist of songs that I play. For me, songs and music, I don't know how certain artists have a way of putting words and lyrics together that perfectly express what I'm experiencing. Like, I don't have the words, but I can lean on those words to like get me encouraged and inspired. The same thing goes for, I am a spiritual practitioner of like Christianity. So I have to go back to my scriptural truth. And this is going to be different for everybody. But for me, I have to remember like, okay, the like higher power that I believe in has told me that it is when I'm weakest that God can do the best work through me. And I'm feeling really weak right now. So you
Yeah.
better be doing something magical. And the evidence in my life has been that every time I submit to that process, the magic does come.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's easy. Like, there have been plenty of arguments and fights, and I've gotten into drag out fights with prosecutors, and I've had judges tell me all kinds of horrific things. It's not easy, but it's worth the fight. And I think, to your point with the financial journey, having financial independence, being out of debt, has given me the freedom to speak hard truths to people in the justice system, to say, your behavior is not okay. You either shape up or get off my team, or, I'm sorry, judge, child sex abuse material is not a victimless crime. And let me teach you why it's not. And they can fire me and I would be fine, because financially we've done all the right things so that we would be okay.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I think this is such an important topic, because, when you start talking about your career, your salary, what you make, I think people are less willing to speak up, because from a financial standpoint, they are at risk. If I lose my job, man, I got these credit card bills, I got these car payments I got to make, I got a mortgage, I got to feed my kids. I'm not going to have any money. But by getting yourself out of debt, you again give yourself that platform to step up on and fight against that imposter that's keeping you there. It's so much fun to talk to you, because I struggle with some of the stuff that you've talked about. It's like, I get ready to do a workshop that I've done hundreds of times, and that day I'll still be a nervous wreck, but it's going back to that proof of progress. And can you talk about that too? Tracking your expenses is something that we talk about all the time, because most people have no idea what's going on in their bank account, where they're spending their money. How important is going back and looking at your history of your success and the things that you've done? Is there anything that you recommend for that? Like, we give our members like trackers, savings trackers, debt payoff trackers, like things that they can look back on, because there are going to be those moments where life is not going well and something happened, you got sick, you lost income, whatever. And all of a sudden you feel like, man, nothing I do ever works. And you get that tunnel vision, and you forget about all the progress that you've made up to that point. What do you recommend to people to have something physically that they can to look at? Do you recommend anything like that, tools or anything that you've used?
Absolutely. I do also have a lot of tools that I use in my practice. If your audience is interested, they can DM me Wheel of Life exercise. So I have a Wheel of Life exercise. It's very simple. You can even Google it and find one online, but it helps you evaluate the 10 areas of your life, which is, fitness, family, work, intimacy, relationships, like whatever areas that you want to improve in, on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 is like, it's terrible, 10 is awesome. So every client I work with, this is one of the exercises they do. And it cracks me up every time, because I have different packages. So let's say they do a 12-session package. By the time we're done, we do that exercise again. And I'm showing them, I'm like, 3 months ago, you said you were a 2 on finances, and now you're an 8. And we didn't even talk about finances because imposter syndrome, like, we know if it affects one thing in your life, it affects all things in your life. And so when you elevate one aspect of your life, you elevate all elements of your life. And all of those clients, 100% of them are like, I said what 3 months ago? Like, there's no way. And again, this goes hand in hand with your typical listener is probably a very high achiever. And so the way I describe what's happening in this particular phenomenon is it's like the gym, where the first time you go to the gym, it's awful. It's like scary and you don't know what you're doing and it's really hard and it's painful. But when you've been going to the gym for years, it's still painful. It's still hard. You just get better and stronger at it.
Yeah.
And so having that data to quantify your improvement, you're going to realize like, oh, my brain lies to me all the time about how well I'm doing. But thankfully, because I took the time, the 5 minutes to do this Wheel of Life exercise 3 months ago, and I did it again, I can see that I've actually improved. And now I get to decide, am I going to celebrate this improvement or am I going to beat myself up because I'm not perfect?
Right. Yeah, it's so good. And so if you're listening out there, tracking is so important. And again, and across so many areas of your life. And if the more we do, and again, I struggle with it too. It's easy just to not do it, but it is so powerful when you actually do it. So Alani, I got one more question for you. And like you said, you've been in debt, got yourself out of debt. Now you're millionaires. Like if you had to give one piece of financial advice or one suggestion to anybody out there that's made, I think, the biggest difference for you with your finances and really your overall quality of life when it comes to managing your money, like what would you say to that person?
I would say going back to that spiritual practice, and I was just talking to a client about this earlier today. So the idea of compound interest is such a perfect example because the theory is if you put a little bit of money in your account every month, you're going to see it go up a little bit, but then like 20 years in, you're going to see it skyrocket. And it's a theory. And even if you have faith that it's true, until you see that skyrocket, until you get to that really like inverted part of that graph and you experience it, then you're like, oh my gosh, this is real. Oh my gosh. Like I literally followed the very simple steps that these guys tell me to do, and it actually worked. We do multiple family meetings a year to talk about our financial goals, and we track progress every month. So on the first of every month, I'm pulling all the numbers. But the first time we made like $20,000 in a month just from investments, I was like, we made more than we make in our W-2s sleeping. What? For someone who's just starting on the journey, it really is that simple. The tools to becoming a millionaire are so easy. You just have to decide that you're worthy of being a millionaire and that you're going to trust the process and work on that spiritual side that says, if I do this, I'm going to get that, X result. So that's my tip.
Yeah, I love it. Alani, where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, my website is www.mightysparrowcoaching.com. I'm also on LinkedIn is my favorite, but I'm on Instagram and Facebook also at Mighty Sparrow Coaching.
Wow, super cool. Awesome resources. Well, thank you so much for being here. Probably, in the last 5 years that I've been doing this podcast, maybe one of the coolest guests we've ever had on.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for your important work. Like, spreading that financial message it's not just about the money. It's about creating the impact, right? And living your life purpose. And so I'm going to leave it with you guys in terms of just reminding you that when your imposter comes up means you're on the right track. You just have to learn how to harness it to work for you.
I love it. Alani, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. You guys are amazing.
All right, guys. So as I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to pay off debt, you want to save more money, you want to end financial stress, you want to reduce paycheck to paycheck living and its effect on your life, and you want to take better control of your finances, all you have to do is head over to debt-free-dad.com, click on the green button at the top of the page, and I'm going to show you in this amazing quick video how we can get you better results in just the next 30 to 60 days, and you're absolutely going to love it. Go check it out. Hey, we get that getting out of debt isn't easy, but with our help and hopefully with your hard work, consistency, and discipline, we promise you guys, this will be some of the best work that you do in your entire lives. Thanks for joining us on today's show, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.